Hi guys, this is Kindra Jones, Grayson County 4-H Youth Development Agent. We have Kyle Powell with us today, or we are actually at his place today, and he is a resident beekeeper in Grayson County, and he's been doing this for about 15 years, and he's working on becoming a master beekeeper, and he's going to tell us all about bees today, and we're going to ask some questions, and he's going to take them in.
Well, my day job is a high school teacher. I teach math and German, and beekeeping's been a hobby for me for a little over 15 years. It's just something that I really love to do. And one of my goals for a long time has been to become a master beekeeper. It's kind of like a master gardener program, but Kentucky's program is kind of frozen right now. It's been paused for a while. So I found a program through the University of Florida, and that's what I'm working on currently.
Awesome. So let's get started on some bees.
So this is my bucket of tools. I take this with me every time I go to look in a hive, and I try to keep almost everything that I could need because it's annoying and time consuming to get all the way up there, have a hive torn apart, and then think, oh, I really need this. So this is my bucket of tools. I have lighter fluid for the Zippo because I have to always have a smoker going. My hive tool is always behind this bottle of lighter fluid because it's easy to see and I can always grab it in just a second. You can see it's got lots of propolis on it. All of that brown, sticky, bumpy stuff is propolis. Gets all over everything. It's really hard to get off. I have, for catching swarms, a little limb saw. So if I need to saw off part of a bush or a tree so that I can carry the swarm over a hive body and shake them in, that helps a lot. Same thing with a little pair of pruners, swarm catching supplies. Sometimes the bees get in the way and I have to brush them a little bit. So this is just a soft bristle brush, doesn't hurt them, just moves them around some so I can do what I need to. I have extra smoker fuel in here. I have several kinds of queen catchers. So this one is kind of like a clamshell, so it opens up. The queen is on the comb, open it up, put it over, and closes around her, and it doesn't hurt her. It's got the little gap so it won't pinch her legs there. And then I can take her somewhere else, different hive or whatever I need to do. If I need to mark a queen, then I can put her in this little tube, and I can take this little sponge and slowly work her up to that mesh, and the top of her thorax will be against the mesh, and I can take my paint pen and just put a little dot on her, and then it's easy to find. I've got my industrial king-size Sharpie for notes on the outside of the hives. Some people will clip a wing on the queens, and then they can't swarm. If they try to swarm, she just kind of lands outside the hive because she can't go very far, and then they can just collect that swarm. Some people don't, and I normally don't, because the bees might think she's injured and kill her and replace her. But it's a tool. I keep it around just in case. Another style of queen catcher is this. It's called a pipe queen catcher. So if she were on the frame, I would take this sponge out and set it over her, and with a little patience she'll eventually go up in the stem, and then I can put that back in, carry her wherever I want her, and then take out this stopper and just let her crawl out. It's a little less stressful on her. So this is the Beekeeper PPE, personal protective equipment. You have to have some kind of veil. Okay, it's really, really dangerous to try to do anything with bees without a veil. You may see people on YouTube do it, but don't try it. You may not be allergic enough that one sting on your arm or your leg or anything will make you have a full body reaction, but the bees can go for your eyes. One stinger in the eye and you're blind. Okay, so always wear a veil. I typically put tape around the bottom of my jacket because young bees, the brand new adult bees can't fly yet. So if I'm looking at a frame, I might accidentally knock some off, they fall to the ground, and then they start crawling. So they might crawl up under the jacket, and then all of a sudden, all this is connected and they're in my face. Or they're down my arms, stinging my arms. And I'll also tape the bottom of my pants because I don't want them to just crawl up my pant leg. So some kind of veil, usually gloves. Some people don't wear gloves, but I swell a little bit, so I always do. And a little bit of duct tape. Okay, so smoker fuel, you can use anything that burns, really. You don't want anything with chemicals in it. So this is untreated burlap. It's really shredded coffee bags, but I bought it from a bee supply company. Just light a little and make fire. The smoke doesn't hurt the bees at all. It calms them down because bees communicate with pheromones. Pheromones are scent signals. So when you put smoke in the hive, it disrupts those signals a little bit and they get confused. So they're really just a little bit confused but not aggressive, and it lets you work with them a lot easier. Just keep packing that in there and try not to smother it out. And we have lots of nice, cool white smoke. So it's not hot at all. Okay, so this one I looked at a few days ago, and I think it'll be pretty interesting for us to look in. I have lots of different sizes and colors here. The colors mean absolutely nothing. I get cheap paint. So when Walmart has paint that's a mist tint, if it's outdoor paint, I'll buy it, I'll paint a hive that color. I don't normally use dark colors because that gets hotter in the summertime. So try to go with light colors. They're really good at location. So if I took this hive and I slid it back just about 2 feet, then they would come to where the entrance used to be and hover there. And it would take them a few minutes to actually figure out that the hive moved back. So they have a tiny little GPS in their brain. It's really, really cool. So if you can look at the entrance here, you can see some guard bees there. You see the foragers coming and going. So there's some coming in with pollen on their back legs. Looks like just little wads of white or yellow stuff on the back legs. That one has some. So some of them go collect pollen, some collect nectar, they collect water, and they get tree sap. They use tree sap to stick the hive together, seal it up watertight and airtight. So do a little smoke at the front, and then a couple puffs in the top, and that's about all it takes. This hive is one that I just started this year. I split another hive to make this one. So you can divide hives and they can make their own queen sometimes. There's a little bit of a chance that that won't work out for them, but normally it does. I have a feeder in here because this is a growing hive. Normally the first year you have to feed them all throughout. And it normally takes the second year before they make extra honey that I can take for myself. So these bees are really calm. Like none of them are coming up to get me. They're not coming up to fly at my face or anything like that. So these frames are the most genius beekeeping invention ever. Because before this, people just put them in boxes or straw skeps, and you couldn't see what the bees were doing. You couldn't see anything about what was going on in there. But the frames let me move stuff around. I can inspect them. I can move frames between hives. So if one hive is weak, I can give them honey or brood from another hive. Brood is the word for young bees, like eggs and larvae. So these are all workers right here. The honeycomb starts out like this. I put this wax foundation in with the wires to keep it steady, keep it straight. And then they make the cells. This just gives them a little blueprint to go by. So they're drawing out those cells, and then they're putting some nectar into the cells right there. It looks really clear and white. Different plants make different kinds of nectar, different colors and different flavors. So that's where you get like your orange blossom honey, your clover honey, tupelo honey, all of those different things. So this frame is older. It's dark comb, so the bees have stained it by walking over it, and the cocoons where they raise the young bees and they pupate in the cells, that turns the comb dark too. You can see eggs in this area. They look like little white commas at the bottom of the cells, and then as you move on this direction, you can see the larva. The egg hatches in about 4 days, turns into a larva, and it looks like a little grub worm. Bees are insects, so they go through those stages to become an adult. Egg, larva, pupa. This one has lots of honey in this frame. All of this honey is open. The bees go and collect nectar from flowers, and the flowers make that nectar to lure in the bees so that they will accidentally pollinate the flowers. It's just a trick. Then the bees bring the nectar back, and they put it in the hive, but it has too much water content to keep for the winter. So what they do is put it in here and they dry it out. They fan air through the hive and dehydrate that honey until the moisture content is around 18%. And then they put a cap over the top of the honey. And there's some of it here on this one. So this is capped honey. That is honey that they could keep for the winter. Or if I had extra, I could take the frames of honey out and I could take it and eat it. And in the center here, these are the capped brood cells. So this is bee pupa. We had the 3 stages, egg, larva, pupa. So all of these are bees in the pupa stage. When the bee is fully mature, it will chew its way out of that cell and it will be an adult worker bee. And as soon as they come out, they go to work. They start cleaning the hive. They tend to the eggs and the larvae, they feed the larvae, and they do everything inside the hive until they're old enough to fly. It takes them a few days to develop enough to fly even after they come out. And then they go work for the rest of their life. They wear their little wings out, and then that's it. It takes about 6 weeks in the summertime. Bees tend to work in the center of the boxes first. So the frames in here in the middle, they make that comb thicker and fill it up first, and then they move toward the outsides. And this one, this is a hive that I started later. So I start them with a small box. It only has 10 frames in it. And then once they fill all those out, I'll add a second one. And I'll start in the middle and draw out all of that comb and fill it up. After they get 2 boxes, if I still have enough time before winter, I'll put on a 3rd one, and that will be the extra honey that I can take from them. And to harvest the honey, first you have to get all the bees out, which is not as hard as it sounds. You can shake the frames and brush the frames on both sides, get the bees off. And then there are options. There are machines that are called extractors that spin the frames around and sling all the honey out. Or if you want to go really low tech, you can just crush all of the wax and strain the wax out, strain the honey out. And it works just fine. There was a question on the Facebook page about good bees versus bad bees. There aren't really any bad bees. There are Africanized bees, and that's a hybrid that was a man-made hybrid that started in South America, and we don't really have Africanized bees in Kentucky. They cannot go through a harsh winter. They don't store enough honey to survive a long cold spell. So you don't have any worries about that. Every kind of bee and wasp does something good. So can't really say that there are bad bees. Yellow jackets, you know, you probably don't want those in your yard, but still not bad. This is a really full frame of honey. They've started to cap the corners over here, so that honey is ready, but in the middle here they still have some work to do drying that out. See, here is a drone. Drones are the male bees. They have those huge eyes that take up the huge head, or take up the whole head. And their abdomen is bigger than the workers too. So the workers do all the work in the hive. The male bees just mate with the queen. That's all they do. Eat, mate with the queen, then they die. And the queen does nothing but work all the time also, but she lays eggs all day long. The bees dry out the honey by fanning their wings, and they circulate air through the whole hive. So the hive, even if they live in a hollow tree, it's usually a vertical space, and it's got a chimney effect. So the air comes in the bottom and then out the top. Even these top covers have little notches so that the air can come out the top. And that's something that they naturally do. The foragers come in the hive and they pass around what they collected, like nectar or pollen, and they dance to show the other bees where it came from. A lot of times when I use smoke and open up a hive, it disrupts them so that they stop dancing. So we'll have to see if they go back to it in a second. But the dance shows distance and direction to the food. There's one right down there. She's got pollen on her legs and she's dancing. She's going in a circle and wiggling her abdomen. And the other bees are coming to her to see what she's got. She'll pass around little bits of it and they'll taste it and go, ooh, yeah, that's good. That's better than what we were collecting. She has to convince them that it's a good source and it's worth their time. It's a happy food dance. Pollen can be lots of different colors. That girl has yellow pollen. It could be green, white, yellow, orange, red, brown, black, purple, almost any color you can imagine. She has a yellow dot. Beekeepers mark queens for two reasons. One is to find them easier, because if you don't have her marked, it's kind of like Where's Waldo. You can look through the whole hive 2 or 3 times and you're just looking for one bee that's barely different than the others. So it's tough. The other reason is the paint color tells you how old she is. This one has a yellow dot because she's special, she's a different type. But normally all queens raised in 2020 would have a blue dot. So next year, if I'm looking through my hives and I see a queen with a blue dot on her, I know that she is 1 year old. 2 years old is really the max life expectancy for a queen. After that, they really go downhill in their ability to lay eggs and produce enough for a hive. Last year's color was green, so when I look through these hives and I see a green queen, I know that she will have to be replaced next year. There she is, bottom of the frame. Right there. She's sticking her head in a cell right now. Did you see her down there?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when I open up a hive, they get a little skittish, so they may run around, run to different sides of the frame, back and forth. And there she goes down the other side. Normally she would just be laying eggs in cells over and over and over, all day long. The workers, she would have a group of workers around her and they would feed her, so she can do nothing but lay eggs. Doesn't even get a lunch break. Normally you buy a queen and a bunch of workers with her. The way that bees are typically sold is a 3-pound package with a queen, or you could buy 5 frames with a queen like this size. So sometimes you'll get like a corrugated plastic box that will be this size, and you have 5 frames and a queen in there, and she's already laying eggs. If I wanted to sell one of those, or if I wanted to make one for myself, then I would just take that frame with the queen, put it in another box, and then take another 4 frames of whatever I want, put in that box, and let them go. And as long as they have food and enough time before winter, then they should grow. The number one pest for beekeepers is the varroa mite, and it's really changed things since about 1980. The varroa mite carries viruses and diseases, and it can just destroy a hive within a couple of years. So if you notice all my notes on here, I keep records of how the hive is doing and what's going on, and then I have to check for mites every so often. So June 26th, there were 7 mites per 300 bees in that hive, and that tells me that that's enough that I need to treat them. So there are all kinds of different treatments and methods for that, but that's really been the biggest concern for beekeepers the last few years, and it's the biggest reason that beginners fail and quit. They don't monitor the mites take over, and it's one of those things that by the time you know it's a problem, the hive is already a goner. It may not be actually dead yet, but it will be soon. The bees, the time commitment and how often you check on them really depends on the time of year. So in the spring, once a week, definitely once a week, I'm in here and I'm looking to see what's going on. In the summertime, it gets kind of dry and things slow down a lot, so every 2 weeks could be enough. And then toward the fall, when I want to make sure that they're healthy for winter and they have enough honey stored for winter, then I'll go once a week again. So it's not that much time, but it can get frantic because sometimes I look in here and there's a surprise and I go, oh, I really need to do this with this hive. So I have to run and get everything together and then come back the next day. And it can get a little hectic at times. So swarms are something that happen naturally in the spring. Swarm is reproduction on the hive level, because if you think about bees as an organism and you have a colony, then one colony in a wildfire or a bear attack is just gone. And for the interest of the bees and the species, they have to reproduce on the colony level. So a swarm is where a colony gets too full for their container, and then they make a new queen. The old queen leaves with half the bees, and then the new queen stays with the other half. So they've just turned one colony into 2. So this happens with beekeepers, this happens with wild bees in the spring, and they can go land on a bush or a tree, or I've gotten one from underneath a car bumper before. It was the strangest place, but I do go catch those swarms pretty often. These 2 were swarms from this spring. This one was from Clarkson, and then this one was from here. This one actually came from this shoe-night bush right here. So sometimes they don't go very far. And I love going to get swarms because they're just free bees. It's a service because you get somebody else's bees out of the way, and then I get to keep them. Okay, other questions from the Facebook page. How long does it take to harvest honey? Well, it's like a 1 or 2 day ordeal, whether there's a ton or a little, because first I have to come out here, I have to take the boxes off, get all the bees out of the frames. Then I can put those frames in another container so that the bees can't come back to them. Then I have to take it in the house and get out all of my equipment. So I have to, if I'm using the extractor, I have to take a knife and cut the caps off of the honey. We saw those caps that were on each of the honey cells. So I cut that off, put it in the extractor, crank the extractor and sling all the honey out. And then honey's really thick, so it takes a long time to filter. I have to filter it into buckets, then let that settle really well. All the bubbles and pieces of wax will come to the top of the bucket, and then I can finally put it into jars. So it takes a couple days to do the whole process just because it's slow. Usually I only do that twice a year because it makes a huge mess. So wait for the spring crop of honey, then do that sometime in June, and then stuff dries up in July. But in August, we start to get goldenrod and asters blooming. So that's another good crop of honey plants. So I'll do another set of honey harvest in October. The bees need about 80 pounds of honey for the winter. So when I'm doing that October harvest, I have to make sure that the bottom of the hive is really, really full. Make sure that they have enough for the winter. Bees don't really hibernate. They stay active all winter long. They cluster up to stay warm, and then they eat the honey that's stored, and they vibrate their muscles. So it's kind of like if I was outside in the wintertime and I was doing jumping jacks to stay warmed up. That's their method. They just vibrate their muscles, and they use that honey as the food to keep them moving. They start in the bottom of the box and they move up all winter long. And then hopefully by February, March, things start to bloom and the bees are at the top, the end of their food source, but then they have wild sources that they can gather from. The queen does not lay all winter except maybe a tiny amount in January, February. She really stops in November, December, and they'll just stay in that cluster trying to stay warm. And then in January, February, March, she'll start a small little cluster of eggs. The trick is, usually as soon as the weather warms up, stuff explodes. Flowers, trees, everything blooms. So they can't take advantage of that unless they have a population built up. So she wants to start laying eggs a little early, but if she lays too many and they can't keep them warm, everybody freezes and dies. It's a really delicate balance. The bees know where they live, but there's a thing called drift. So these bees may get a little confused or blown around by the wind or whatever, and they may go to this hive sometimes, they may go to this hive sometimes. Not often. It's something that's the subject of some research, and they really want to see why and how much the bees drift between hives. Generally, if a bee comes with food or resources, the guard bees will let them in. A strong full hive will have around 60,000 bees. If you're looking at one of these, this is probably 30,000, and then a 5 frame probably around 15,000 if it's really, really full. But 60,000 full population for summer. And those summer workers will only live about 6 weeks. They wear out their muscles and their wings in about 6 weeks of life. But then when you get to October, the queen lays eggs that will develop into workers that last all winter. And they're a little bit different. It's not like we can look and see the difference, but their fat stores are different. And those bees will survive all winter long, and they'll become the spring foragers until her spring eggs come along. So the queen only goes out to mate one time at one period during her life. When she first hatches out in a hive, she goes on mating flights. And it could be 4 or 5 consecutive days, but that's the only period when she mates during her life. She mates with male drones, and she stores that sperm in her body. When she lays eggs in the hive, she chooses whether or not to fertilize the eggs. And we don't know exactly how or why, when she knows, but she chooses, and unfertilized eggs turn into drones, male bees. Fertilized eggs turn into females, the workers. So the workers can take on any number of different jobs, and they determine that based on pheromones and the needs of the hive. But the males can never take on any of those other jobs. They're stuck as a male, and all they can do is that one job. The workers, they know by the pheromones and the resources in the hive what they need to do. So a worker may start out as a nurse bee feeding the brood, and then move up to a guard bee to guard the front of the hive. And then as it matures and can fly, it may go collect pollen, but then the hive decides it has plenty of pollen. So then it can switch to collecting nectar, or they run out of water to cool the hive. So then they change to collecting water. It can vary on a day-by-day basis. So how do you make new queens? It can be a really simple process where I just take some eggs out and put it in a box without a queen, and I just hope that they will make me a good queen. Or it can be a really involved process where I actually go and take a tiny little scoop and I scoop out the young larvae and put them in their own little cells and put it in a special hive to make queens, and have that hive make 15 or 20 all at once. And then as they mature, I divide them up and put them in different hives. There's lots and lots of ways to make queens. The color of the queens goes by universal color code. So years that end in 0 or 6 are blue. So 2020 is blue. This blue is a little too dark, so for my own uses, I got coral, just because it's not in the color scheme anywhere else and it shows up really well. Last year, the year that ended in 9, the color code was green. White's cooler for one thing, but traditionally it's white because the natural predators of bees are normally darker colors. Bears, skunks, stuff like that. And those are the main ones, especially around here.
Alright, so that wraps up our bee tutorial, bee information, and we really appreciate Kyle giving us all this information, allowing us to ask multiple questions throughout. And if you have other questions that you'd like to have answered, feel free to put those in the comments and we will get those to Kyle. And if you have a swarm of bees and need those removed, we have a new friend that can help us do that now. So feel free to contact us, or we'll get you in touch with Kyle if you have other questions. All right, thanks.